Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. By popular demand, I asked you guys last video what spawn guide you want me to do next, and a few of you, including Lunchtime the Goat, suggested that I do Paris. Now, after doing a little bit of research and doing the VOD reviews to get all the data I need for this video, I can see why it was sought after. There's some real complex bits, so bear with me here. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible for you guys. So yeah, this is what we're doing. Spawn guide for Paris. If you're not sure how to read spawns, this video is going to be for you. I do have spawn guides for every other map in the game, for ranked at least. So check out the playlist that this is linked within, and you'll find all the rest dating all the way back to when Skid Row was a map in ranked play. Before we get into it, for those of you who this is your first spawn guide, I'm going to go through what the diagram means first and foremost. So first of all, you've got the two hard points here. The brighter one is the current, and the more dim one here is the next hill. So you can see P1 is what we're looking at first, P2 is next. So it's to give you an idea of where the two maps are, or the two hills, sorry, are located on the map. And we then have the spawn points, which you will find in the rings. Typically, the main two spawns are pink and blue. I tend to use pink for my preferred spawn and blue for the unfavorable spawn, and then the teal and yellow are just the alternative spawns to both of these spawn points themselves. We then have the shaded areas here, which you can see at the bottom on this example, and they're basically the spawn blocker points for that, the color ring spawn. So for example, to block this pink spawn, you can be in this pink area here. That's the example. That's a real simple as it gets description of what it means. But obviously, if you have any questions whatsoever, leave a note down in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. I'll be leaving a document of this in the description or in my Discord, so you can feel free to have a read yourself and have it up on your second monitor, have it up on your phone or your laptop or something when you're next in your Paris hardpoint match, and it should help you to no end. Now, I do want to say as a little bit of a disclaimer, the game's very random. There's a lot of potential scenarios that can happen when you guys are out there playing Call of Duty yourself. This will help you for 99% of circumstances. It won't be perfect because in order to get perfect data, I pretty much need to be a dev with much more game time. So apologies, that's not the case. But 99% of the time, this is going to work for you. So it'll be gravy. It's absolutely fine. So the main spawns on this hill, we're going to kick it right off now. Enough of me rambling on, are pink and blue. I've suggested pink is slightly better spawn because of how close it is to the new hill at P2. Plus, it's easier to overlook a real key area from this pink spawn, which we're going to get into in a second. Now, teal is the alternative spawn to blue, and yellow is the alternative spawn to pink. Okay, super simple so far. Now, map control on this hill is the main thing that makes you spawn where. Okay, that's the main decider. So for example, if the blue team has a lot of uncontested control of Bookstore Street or Library Street, whatever you guys want to call it, this area down here, they'll keep spawning blue, but what will happen is the enemy team who are spawning pink now spawns further out at yellow because the blue team's weighted towards its bottom half, so the pink team's natural spawn point becomes yellow, which is the top half of the map. On the other hand, if the pink team has a lot of uncontested, this is why I'm really emphasizing uncontested control of this street here, they'll keep spawning pink, but the blue team will in fact end up spawning teal. So that's a real nice, if you want to bump them back, you want to get control of this street. Now, the spawns are less fluid if both teams are contesting this street. So although I've put them as block spots, it's not strictly true, which is why I want to add a little bit of context here. But if both teams are sort of contesting this area, the street is not going to necessarily be as fluid as I've just mentioned it, which is why I specifically said it has to be uncontested control of that street to get them to spawn a little bit further out. So if both teams are contesting the street, both teams will keep the close spawns, and then whoever ends up being the victor, if it's trade, leave a one-man standing, whatever team that person is on, say it's the from the blue side, they'll still get the close spawns, but the other team will end up spawning a little bit further out at yellow. Now, we're going to take a little bit of a couple of scenarios here, and so you guys can imagine yourself in the game itself. So, blue and pink are normal spawns. So if you spawn at either one of these two spawns, there's not too much to worry about most of the time, okay? Now, if you spawn yellow and you were spawning pink, this tells you that the blue team have obtained almost complete control of Library Street, or your team has decided to push all the way up towards teal, which I would suggest is not a sensible thing to do. So if you spawn yellow, it means the team have either pushed all the way up this side or the enemy team have pushed up this side. Okay. Similarly, if you spawn teal and you were spawning blue, this tells you that the pink team have obtained complete control of this street down here, or your team have decided to run all the way around towards yellow spawns, which actually isn't a bad thing because P2 is pretty much there. But this is why it's so important that when you load in, when you spawn in, you've got to check your minimap or use your comms to see where your teammates are when you spawn in, because it really matters. It really helps you evaluate what's causing me to spawn here. Is it the enemies or is it my teammates? Now, it's quite hard to completely flip spawns here, but if this happens, you can almost guarantee that someone on the enemy team has fully gotten control of both of your spawn points. So say, for example, you were spawning in pink and you somehow now spawn the complete other side of the map. It means someone from this left-hand side team has got control of both these two spawn points. Otherwise, you'd have just gone to your alternative spawn. Now, the best way to play this hill is to obtain height around the hill, typically towards the bistro side here. There's a lot overlooking P1 from this side. It's really nice, but you can see there's a couple of windows as well. So you want sort of height on top of the hill, no matter what side you're on. Okay, but it's very important to try and get the pink spawns as quickly as you can, as it resides closer to the next hill. Now, if you're in a coordinated four-man squad, it's really easy to actually spawn trap the enemy to exactly where you want them, just by either, for example, if you're this right-hand side of the map and you want them to spawn teal, all you need to do is get control of street and they'll spawn teal. Similarly, if you want to let them spawn in this blue one, you leave the street completely open, have a little bit more control of this top street, and they'll spawn there. It's super easy to navigate. So moving on to P2, now this is a really, really complex hill. So bear with me. I'm expecting a lot of questions on this one. So you need your thinking hats on specifically with this one. So bear with me. I'm going to try and explain it in the most simplest way I can, but it is complex, so it's still going to be a little bit difficult. So if nothing happens on the map and people aren't pushing whatsoever, the main spawns are pink and blue. Okay. Now the alternative spawn for blue is teal, and the alternative spawn for pink is strangely yellow, which is here. So nothing too out of the ordinary, other than the fact the placement's a little bit weird for that alternative pink spawn. Now, simply put, if the pink team pushes slightly through P2 towards the blue spawn, the blue team will end up spawning teal. Okay, so if you are this pink side team and you really want to get as much map control as you can, push through the hill, the enemies will no longer spawn here. They'll spawn even further out into this teal spot here. Now, if the blue team who were spawning here somehow managed to get very close to P2 and infiltrate P2 itself, the pink team ends up spawning all the way back out here to yellow, meaning that you're now dealing with what we call a parallel spawn, because you've got, you're spawning on the same half of the map, running as parallel to each other to the hill itself. So just be very careful that, this typically happens more often when the teams on the blue team have got hill control, and therefore you're spawning here. So that's when that would typically happen, if the blue team eventually gets hill control. So if you are on the blue team and you do end up getting hill control and a decent amount of control around P2, be careful that the enemy team won't strictly spawn in the back. They'll probably spawn just here. Okay. Now, the red spawn is a last resort spawn, so which opens up when all other spawn points are blocked, which you're probably wondering, how the bloody hell does that happen? And it normally happens, from what I've seen, when teams start to rotate towards P3, which is over here, which, as you can see, it's quite easy to block 3 spawns from just being around the new hill. So that's how that happens, but just be very careful if you do have teammates rotated to P3 and you're in P2. Sometimes the enemy can literally spawn in this little room here, so just be very careful. So we're going to take a few scenarios here to hopefully get you in the mindset of being in the hill itself, or being in this game itself. So if you spawn pink, it generally means the enemy has little to no map pressure towards the hill and you're defending it pretty well. Now, if you spawn blue and your team doesn't have control of the space around the hill, nothing to note. It just means your team, the pink team, hasn't pushed through P2 either. So it's fairly straightforward, okay? Now, if you spawn blue but your team has got decent map control of this hill area, it means that the enemy team will be spawning yellow, okay? Because they'll be blocking the pink spawn by being pushed up towards the hill. So just be very careful, as I said earlier, to watch for these parallel spawns. You may have to be able to cut off people from the middle here. If you spawn blue, your teammate's got control of P2. Get to this heady, look at the cross, and you'll probably be able to catch some freebies across there, okay? Now, if you spawn teal, it generally means that the team spawning pink have pushed through P1 towards blue spawn, and you're spawning out as a result. Okay. Now, if you spawn yellow, what that tends to mean is the team spawning blue have probably got control of the hill, or are pushed up close enough to the pink spawn to block it, and therefore you're having to use the alternative spawn. Okay. Now, in an unlikely circumstance that you end up spawning red, very unlikely. It tells you the enemies are pretty much everywhere and definitely rotating to the new hill. Apologies for the cold, guys. I'm trying to get these videos out, but I'm a bit bunged up. But so yeah, hope you're persevering with me here. So strategy-wise on this hill, you really want these pink spawns. You can see how close these pink spawns are compared to any other spawn. And the only way to hold these pink spawns properly without spawning out yellow is to properly have good control of this entire half of the map. This includes control of steps, bistro, and the hill itself. Leaving any one of these open can allow you to spawn out. For example, if you leave this open, an enemy ends up running up these stairs, it blocks pink, and you automatically spawn out. Okay. Now, if you find yourself in a sticky situation where you end up having parallel spawns, and you're spawning blue and the enemy spawning yellow, or vice versa, you really need to be trying to play for cuts and try and go deep into the pink spawn and play for the kills that open up the better spawn for your team, of course. But obviously, you don't want to do that too late, because P3, as you can see, is the other side of the map completely. So push these pink spawns, do what you can with that, but don't do it, I'd say, in the second half of the hill, because you really just want to be setting up for the P3 at that point. Now, again, being aware of where your team are is key on this hill to know where the enemies will be spawning. So use your attack map and use your comms, because it's going to help you out to no end. Okay. Now, moving on to P3, obviously a little bit of a breather for your head. This is a little bit simpler. The main spawn is simply the pink spawn here. If no one is blocking this pink spawn, the spawns will simply be open. Okay, it's that simple. Now, if the pink spawn is blocked, it opens up the blue and teal spawns as alternative spawns. Now, what determines which one of these you spawn at depends on what weight of the map, what map control the pink team have. So say, for example, the pink team have a little bit more, they've got the hill and they've got a little bit more control of the top side of the map. You will be spawning, the blue team will spawn here. That's the alternative spawn that will open. On the flip side, if the pink team have got a little bit more control of this lower street down here, the spawn that opens up as the alternative spawn will be the other side, which is this teal one. Now, the reason I've put 3 pink spawns is because you can spawn in any 3 of these, okay? Again, it depends on where the enemy team are pushing from. Now, if they're pushing from blue, you're probably likely to spawn top pink, and if they're pushing from teal, you're likely to spawn this bottom pink zone here. So just use this little bit of knowledge to help determine where you need to be holding your defenses from, okay? Now, a little bit of scenarios here. If you spawn mid-pink and your team has decent map control, when I say mid-pink, it's the middle pink one here, there's nothing to worry about, gravy, okay? Now, if you spawn top pink, it tends to mean the enemy is spawning blue, so you should lean your defense towards the lower side of the map to stop them from getting to the hill as easily. Similarly, if you spawn bottom pink, tends to mean the enemy are spawning teal, so again, lean your defenses towards the upper side of the map to have a better defense. Now, if you spawn either teal or blue and your team has 0 pressure at all towards P3, it just means the enemy team have a good hill control. Okay, that's simply all it means, but are slightly push towards the other side of the map. So if you spawn blue, it tends to mean the enemy have got top side control and hill control, and it works with the other way around as well. Now, if you have if you spawn teal or in blue, but your team does have pressure enough to block the pink spawns, again, that opens up parallel spawns because your team is blocking the pink, your team is also blocking blue because you're spawning there, so the only place for the enemy to spawn is parallel to you on the other hill. So yeah, that's how you know you've got parallel spawns. Now, obviously, the best thing to do on this hill, strategy-wise, is to fight massively for these pink spawns. They are by far the best ones to have. And once you have these, you want to try and weight your defense towards the teal block spot, which will spawn the enemy both in blue, which is far away from P3, and, as you'll probably notice, P4. So that's the ideal setup. You want people on P3 waiting or expecting the enemy to spawn blue, but also making sure they spawn blue by having certain control of the top half side of this map just here, okay? Now, if you do not seem to have pink spawns, if you didn't rotate quite effectively as a team, or you get broken and you instantly spawn out, you need to try and have someone on your team infiltrate the pink spawn far enough so that the enemy team are also starting to spawn out. Now, out of the two alternative spawns, obviously the better one to try and have is teal because it's so close to P4. So I would say even if you are spawning blue, maybe take a little bit of time to run through P2 and try and infiltrate from this top side. And just doing that will mean that you're just more likely to have a better rotation to P4. So don't just run. If you spawn blue, don't simply run straight to the hill. Oftentimes, especially if you've got a little bit of time, take your time to rotate to P2. You might even catch a couple of enemies off guard who've just spawned teal and you'll be behind them, but run through P2 and then just attack from the hill from this side, and that will spawn the enemy even further out once you get control of the P3 itself. So yeah, fairly simple and straightforward. Again, this is a little bit more simple, especially compared to P3, and even P5 is even simpler. So again, you can give your heads a real bit of a break. But again, the main spawns are typically blue and pink. Although to spawn blue instead of teal, you need your squad to be there. Otherwise, you will simply spawn teal. So these are the main spawns, but blue is only the main spawn if your blue team has control of this area already. Now, pink spawns, I'm saying, are simply better because of, one, how close it is to P4. They're very sticky, and it's very easy to spawn the blue team a little bit further back. And obviously that, compared to that, is night and day, okay? Now, as I say, pink spawn is very, very, very sticky. So you need to be able to, you need to be physically in the spawn point itself pretty much in order to block it. Now, running past it simply isn't good enough and will often cause the enemy to spawn right behind you. So you really need to make sure you are in that spawn, wait for the enemies to spawn in, and then you can move off to block that spawn. Now, and obviously, as I say, teal is the alternative spawn to blue if you didn't get that already. Now, let's take a couple of scenarios here to try and simplify this further. If you spawn pink, good news, you've got the goat spawn. Simple as. If you spawn blue and your team has got a bit of map control towards P4, nothing to worry about. That's just your default spawn because your team has map control there already. Now, if you spawn blue, but your team has no map control, if you're the first one to spawn here and your teams are nowhere near P4 whatsoever, that can often mean an enemy is coming off P3, which was here, and as a result is blocking the teal spawn. So they're probably going to be around you somewhere. So yeah, in short, you spawn blue, you don't have teammates with you, chances are the enemy is lingering somewhere enough to block this teal spawn. Now, if you spawn teal from spawning in blue, it normally means that you have no map control, or if you do have map control, that the enemy from the pink team is pushed up a little bit far and therefore blocking the blue spawn, spawning you all the way into teal, and they're pushed up this this sort of mid-map zone. Now, if you spawn teal from spawning pink, that indicates very clearly that the enemy is sat blocking the pink spawn and potentially flanking P4. So that's something you can potentially communicate to your team. But it also means that you've probably spawned behind enemies who are blue. So you may be able to shoot, get a couple of freebies there. Now, strategy-wise, putting emphasis on obtaining pink spawns early is huge on this hill. As I say, they're super sticky. But once you get these spawns, it enables a much easier hold for P4. Although on the worst side, it's not great for P5. P5 is a bit of 50-50. We'll get in that in a second. I've labelled this the best one, even though I think P5 is potentially this one. But we're on P4, so that's why this is what I'm saying is the preferred spawn. Okay. But yeah, once you get control of pink, I'd then focus on holding the blue block zone, and that will make it really hard for the enemy team to get close to P4 because they're going to be spawning all the way out over here. But you really want someone to be sat here, both blocking the blue and watching the cross, making sure that an enemy team can't come from teal down street and simply flank and then flip the spawn out. So you need to make sure that if you are spawning them teal, they don't have a gap to get through and flip this pink spawn. Now, again, knowing where your enemy is in this map is key in understanding where knowing where your teammates are. Sorry, on this map is key to understanding where your enemy team, the enemies are spawning. So you need the comms. You need to use your attack map. Press the scoreboard and right bumper or R1 if you're on PlayStation, and it's there. It's free info. Use it. Now, moving on to the last hill. Super, super, super simple. Two main spawns. pink and blue. And personally, I prefer pink, but it's really 50-50 because they're both fairly close to the hill. You may argue this has a better line of sight sooner off of spawn, but personally, I like the pink spawn because you've got a little bit more cover to get to the hill itself, and there's more opportunity to look over the blue cuts to the hill. So you can, if you can be stairs, you can be on this header, you can be on this header, you can be up here, you could be on this truck, this truck. Whereas when you come off of blue, you've got again a little bit. There's less cover and a more direct route to the hill from blue, which makes it easier to get spawn trapped. Now, this is quite an easy hill to flip on. On a lot of hills in COD, I would suggest you would normally want to try and make space by pushing through the hill, like we saw in the previous. But if you do that, you're likely to simply flip. So you really want to, on this hill, hold a middle line, looking at where you think they're spawning. And if you somehow notice your teammate getting a little bit overzealous, pushing up a little bit too much, just check your back, because chances are, as I say, spawns are very flip sensitive. They may flip slightly, okay? Now, you're probably wondering, and as I say, for 95% of the gameplay I saw, and maybe even higher, 99 maybe I'd even go to, these were the only two spawns I saw. Okay, so it's fairly simple. You're either going to spawn in one of these two spawns. But I did see on one occasion somebody spawn in this little zone here, pretty much in P2. And that happened when the blue team had full control of middle. Like, there was no one this side, there was no one here, but they had full control of middle. And one person on the blue team was sort of in P1. And therefore, somehow, I don't know whether it was some sort of squad spawn anchoring or something like that, someone else, whoever died on the blue team, just ended up spawning there instead of all the way back here. Happened once, not sure how it worked, but just bear in mind, I've included it so that you can bear in mind that if you spawn there, it either means your team have got really good map control or the enemy's blocking both spawn points, because it's clearly an alternative spawn for a reason. Just because I saw it doesn't mean it doesn't happen because both spawns are being blocked. So just be careful if you spawn here, when you run out towards the top of the stairs, just check your left in case anyone's spawning in blue. Takes you 2 seconds, and you may as well. And that's actually going to do it. So we've covered all 5 hills, very complex. As I say, this will be documented in a Google Doc for you to have a read through in your own time. Probably best to do that while you're watching the video so you can make sense of it a little bit easier. But as I say, if you have any questions whatsoever, just drop me a message. You can DM me on Twitter, you can DM me on Discord, you can just join the Discord and just enter it into the chat, or comment down below. I'm here to help at the end of the day. So yeah, that's it from me. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao for now.